December 14, 1944, 6th Panzer Army Headquarters near Bad Neuenahr. The air is thick with tension. SS Oberstgruppenführer Sepp Dietrich stands alone, staring at a map that demands nothing short of a miracle. He is 52 years old, a street fighter who clawed his way from butcher's apprentice to SS general. And now, Adolf Hitler has given him the Wacht am Rhein, the Watch on the Rhine, Germany's final desperate gamble to win the war. The order is terrifyingly simple. Reach Antwerp, split the alliance, separate the Americans from the British. Do it in 4 days, 4 days. That's all Hitler has given him. Dietrich knows the mathematics don't work. He commands the elite 1st and 12th SS Panzer Divisions, roughly 20,000 combat troops, fanatical teenagers indoctrinated by Hitler. Youth doctrine. They believe they are racially superior. They've been told American soldiers are soft, undisciplined, unwilling to die for a distant European war. They believe it because they've been trained to believe it. But Dietrich has a fatal problem. He has the tanks. He doesn't have the roads. The entire northern offensive must funnel through a handful of icy forest tracks through the Ardennes, mountain passes barely wide enough for a single King Tiger tank. Already, the roads are clogged. Supply trucks stuck bumper to bumper, infantry columns backing up for kilometers. Berlin promised him clear roads. What he has is a traffic jam in winter, and he doesn't have the fuel. Berlin promised 5 million gallons, but it's trapped at the Rhine, blocked by bombed railways, destroyed bridges, obliterated river crossings. The brutal reality, his king. Tiger tanks, burning 5 gallons per mile at combat speed, have a range of less than 90 miles on maximum fuel. Antwerp is 124 miles away, one way. He must capture American fuel dumps just to keep moving. If those depots are empty or destroyed, his entire offensive dies where it stands. But his men are euphoric, intoxicated with confidence. A thick, freezing fog has gripped the Ardennes for 3 days. Weather forecasts show clearing skies within 72 hours, but for now, the fog is absolute. The sky is grey, blank, impenetrable, and this means the Allied Air Force is grounded. The Jabos, the fighter bombers, cannot fly. The officers tell the troops over and over, the sky is safe. The Americans are blind. Dietrich believes that without air power, American infantrymen are soft targets. He plans massed infantry waves, shock assaults, human overwhelm, tactics from the First World War. He's betting everything on one supposition: that courage and fanaticism can overcome material disadvantage. He thinks his only enemies are the cold and American infantry. He doesn't know the fog is hiding something far deadlier than any airplane. December 16th, 05:30 hours. The Ardennes explodes into violence. Pre-dawn darkness, bitter cold. The Hitler-Jugend Division launches its assault on Elsenborn Ridge with 2 full regiments, 20,000 men surging forward against the inexperienced. U.S. 99th Infantry Division, American teenagers, most experiencing combat for the first time in their lives. The Americans are outnumbered 5-1. They face odds that would break most units. They're pushed back yard by yard, meter by meter, into frozen woods. Snow is knee-deep. Temperature, 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Men slip on ice. Men fall into hidden ravines. The screaming, in German and English, becomes continuous. But the American infantrymen do exactly what they were trained to do. They retreat in organized fashion. They dig. They entrench. Retreat and dig again, creating new defensive lines on higher ground. Foxholes, carved into frozen earth. Each soldier carrying rifle, grenades, gas mask, and the knowledge that somewhere above this forest, American artillery pieces are positioned on reverse slopes, hidden, waiting. The Germans see this and smile with professional confidence. They smile because they know the physics of artillery. Knowledge earned through 4 years of war on the Eastern Front, in France, against the Allies. They've studied it. They've learned it in blood. They know the physics in their bones. In this dense forest, impact fuses are useless. Standard artillery. Fuses, the detonation mechanism used for 100 years of warfare, bury themselves deep in snow before exploding. The shell descends, hits snow, penetrates 30 centimeters into frozen earth, then explodes, but the blast energy is almost entirely absorbed by mud, freezing slush, and earth underground. Shrapnel spreads laterally but dies quickly without airspace. 90% of blast energy is simply absorbed by ground. Trees above remain intact. Foxholes nearby are relatively safe. The SS troops advance with confidence. They dive into cover when they hear the first whistle of incoming shells. They count to themselves as the thud of detonation comes from underground, and they keep moving forward. They are winning. They are pushing the Americans off the ridge. German company commanders are already calculating which American positions they'll overrun next. The breakthrough is coming. It's inevitable. They can feel it. Victory tastes like frost and blood. For 8 days, December 16th through December 23rd, the battle rages without breakthrough. Germans pour everything into the assault. Standard artillery, rockets, massed infantry attacks. The Americans hold. They bleed, but they hold. Casualties mount on both sides. German losses are critical. They cannot afford this attrition rate. Eisenhower realizes the mathematics. He understands what is needed. On December 23rd, as fog clears and weather improves, he makes a decision. The secret weapon is released. By mid-morning December 24th,
enemy movements
the
detected in
12th
Sector
SS
3.
has concentrated
Requesting immediate
remaining
artillery
forces
support.
for what they expect will be
Command,
the
this is
breakthrough
Echo
assault.
7. Heavy fire on the ridge.
Thousands of men packed tight in the forest,
Hurry, we're
shoulder
getting
to
overrun!
shoulder, preparing to
Command,
rush
this is
American
Eagle Eye.
lines
Target
in a
acquired. Grid 4
coordinated wave
Request immediate
attack.
fire support. Over.
Officers check weapons. Sergeants organize squads. The excitement is visible. This is the moment. German officers can feel it. They're about to achieve the breakthrough that's eluded them. They have no idea what's about to happen. No concept of the weapon about to be unleashed. No warning. A U.S. forward observer, positioned on high ground overlooking the German assembly area, peers through binoculars. He sees grey uniforms moving between trees, the concentration of troops, bunching up, preparing for final assault. He realizes instantly what's about to happen. He keys his radio handset. Voice calm, trained, professional. Fire Mission Battalion. 3. Concentration 402. Fire for effect. Pause. Then he adds the code word that will change everything. The code word the German army has never heard before. One word that will transform this battle from tactical engagement to industrial execution. VT in effect. The first salvo arrives from nowhere. No warning. No sound of guns. Shells are already above before Germans even look up. But the shells don't hit the ground. They explode 10 meters in the air, instantly, simultaneously. Every shell in the salvo detonates in perfect synchronization, split seconds apart, creating a dome of shrapnel that falls straight down onto Germans below. The German attack collapses in seconds, no craters in earth, just dead men in deep foxholes. Survivors are paralyzed. Some screaming, some silent, too shocked for sound. They shout into radios, voices rising in panic. The artillery is automatic. It's exploding in the sky. It's raining from above. We can't hide. We can't dig deeper. Where is the Luftwaffe? What they're witnessing is a secret locked in American laboratories for 4 years, a secret so closely guarded that only a handful of American generals knew it existed. Back in Maryland, inside Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory in Silver Spring, U.S. physicists and engineers had created something revolutionary, something that violated conventional understanding of how weapons should work. Project A, the proximity fuse. It looked like a standard artillery fuse, copper casing, threaded base, exactly what would be familiar to a German officer who'd seen artillery for 4 decades. But inside the nose cone was a miracle of miniaturization, a complete radio transceiver housed in a space the size of a walnut, a wet cell battery activating only when the shell was fired, by violent acceleration forces experiencing thousands of Gs, a circuit board calculating distance in real time using principles of radio physics. Meanwhile, 800 kilometers away in the Ardennes, Sepp Dietrich's men were confident in the mathematics they understood. The shell would hit ground. Dirt would absorb blast. They were safe. They'd always been safe. This was the VT fuse. variable time, based on the Doppler effect, the same physical principle that makes an ambulance siren change pitch as it passes you. The principle applies to radio waves as well. As the shell descended through air at 2,000 feet per second, it continuously emitted a radio signal from its nose antenna. When approaching ground, radio waves reflected back off Earth. As the shell moved closer, the frequency of reflected signal increased. The fuse's simple electronic circuit calculated this Doppler shift. When signal reached specific intensity, when the shell was exactly 30 feet above target, when it had descended to precisely the right altitude, the electronic circuit triggered the detonator, not on impact, not when shell hit ground, but in the air above the target, creating a cone of shrapnel raining straight downward at supersonic speeds. The mathematics were irrefutable. But the men in foxholes didn't know about Doppler shifts, didn't know about radio frequencies, didn't know that the physics they'd learned, the physics that kept them alive for 4 years, was about to become obsolete. This technology had been forbidden in Europe. General Dwight Eisenhower himself ordered it kept secret, fearing Germans would recover a dud shell and copy the technology. Too revolutionary, too valuable, too game-changing, used only by the Navy in the Pacific against Japanese ships. But now, with Sepp Dietrich's offensive threatening to break American lines, threatening to split Allied armies, threatening to force another Dunkirk on the Western Front, Eisenhower made a cold calculation. He released the secret. The VT fuse was cleared for use by V Corps artillery defending the northern sector of the Ardennes. The war was about to change forever. The result was mathematical slaughter. Because the shell detonates in air, shrapnel doesn't fly outward in horizontal pattern, spreading laterally. It's driven straight down by explosion pressure wave, by force of thousands of pounds per square inch, creating a vertical cone of steel fragments falling at supersonic speed toward Earth below. The foxhole, designed for 3 years of conventional warfare to protect against ground bursts where shrapnel spreads horizontally, becomes a bucket designed to catch the steel rain. The men inside thought they were safe. They were catastrophically, completely, utterly wrong. A German soldier, who survived and was captured later, described the experience. "We heard nothing. The shell didn't whistle coming in. It was already above us when it exploded. The earth itself seemed to be exploding from above. One moment, a man was breathing. The next moment, he was simply gone." In 8 days, from December 16th to December 24th, the battle transformed. The first 8 days belonged to German courage. The last days belonged to American industrial physics. Reports reaching Dietrich's headquarters after the VT fuse barrage are incoherent, contradictory, impossible to reconcile with standard military reality. Battalions melting away without ever seeing an enemy soldier face to face. Companies wiped out by rain falling from sky, by something that descends but makes no sound until it arrives. The 12th SS Panzer Division, the iron fist of the entire offensive, specifically selected and trained to spearhead breakthrough, is being systematically dismantled by invisible radio waves and electronic circuits. By the time the offensive is finally called off after 9 days of continuous battle, the Hitlerjugend has ceased to exist as a functional fighting force. They started with 20,000 combat troops. They've lost nearly 10,000, roughly 50% of strength. Casualty rates highest in units facing VT fuse barrage after December 24th. Entire companies simply vanish, platoons reduced to scattered survivors, and the tanks, of 170 operational armored vehicles they started with, barely 60 to 80 are still moving. The rest are scrap metal on slopes of Elsenborn, crews buried under snow, mud and stone. General George Patton later wrote in his personal diary that innovation of artillery technology proved as decisive as mobile warfare. Sepp Dietrich lost not because his men weren't brave. They were terrified and kept attacking. Not because his officers didn't know tactics. They were experienced veterans of 4 years of warfare. He lost because he brought 19th century courage to a 20th century physics problem. He brought ideology, will, fanaticism. The Americans brought a vacuum tube, a wet cell battery, and a circuit that could calculate distance. And in the calculus of war, in the mathematics of industrial capacity, the variable time fuse was the only number that mattered. The Germans had staked everything on surprise offensive, on assumption that American soldiers would panic and break under pressure. They bet German courage could overcome American equipment. They were wrong. The lesson was burned into every survivor who made it out of the Ardennes. Courage dies when you can't see the enemy. Will means nothing when the sky rains steel, and fanaticism is just one more variable in a physics equation, a number that can be entered into an algorithm, calculated, and ultimately discarded as insignificant. The industrial system doesn't care about courage, doesn't respond to will. It simply processes targets according to mathematical formula, doesn't recognize ideology, doesn't acknowledge sacrifice. It only recognizes one thing: efficiency. And on December 24, 1944, the American industrial system proved more efficient than German fanaticism. Sepp Dietrich survived the war, captured months later, lived until 1966, long enough to see his ideology completely destroyed and forgotten. In his memoirs, he never fully explained what happened on Elsenborn Ridge, never articulated how 20,000 elite troops could be stopped by artillery fuses. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he didn't understand the physics. Maybe he understood too well, because the truth was simple. He'd lost the war not in the moment of first salvo. He'd lost it years earlier, in factories in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. He'd lost it the moment American engineers began calculating how to kill without firing a shot. Wars are not won by the brave alone. Wars are won in factories, won by the side that can build the weapons, innovate, calculate physics faster than courage can move a finger on a trigger. The invisible killer didn't kill with impact. It killed with precision, with mathematics, with the certainty of the industrial system. By January 1945, the Ardennes offensive was over. Dietrich retreated with what remained of his forces. He never launched another major attack. He had learned the most expensive lesson of the war, written in German blood on the slopes of Elsenborn Ridge.